So, yeah, okay. As you probably know by now, our theme in this series of Sangha Nights is Sangharakshita's 5 aspects of the spiritual path, aka the system of practice, Sangharakshita's system of practice, aka several other things. Integration, positive emotion, spiritual death, spiritual rebirth, and receptivity. And for a little while now, we've been looking at integration. And we've seen that we don't start our adult life as a sort of completely integrated individual, whole individual. We've got lots of conflicting desires, aspects of ourselves that we're not aware of. We can be very different people in different situations. We can be different people according to passing moods. So we're not a harmonious whole. We're more like a bundle of different people tied together with a name and a body. So our first task, or one of the most important tasks in the spiritual life, is to become an individual who can make their own decisions, carry those decisions out, and have all of their energies at our disposal to achieve what we decide to do. So we've heard there are 2 aspects to that. There's what we call integrating the lower, which is integrating those parts of ourselves that maybe we don't like very much. Those parts of ourselves that maybe we sort of don't want to be aware of, that aren't socially acceptable. We don't know about those bits, so they stay largely unconscious, but they can rule us from the shadows. And then there's also we need to integrate, if you like, the higher aspects of ourselves. So, what we're looking at the moment is this aspect of integrating the lower aspects of ourselves. So that we can harness all our energies, so that we can harness all the energy that's tied up in them and become the sort of powerhouse that we could be. So that's the aspect of integration we'll be talking about tonight. And tonight we're going to have 3 short talks based on stories that tell us something about this process of integrating the lower. So first of all, Maitridasa is going to tell us the story of Percival. Then Satyajoyti is going to talk about monkey, and finally I'm going to talk about Goethe's Faust. So I'll hand over to Satyajoyti. Oh, you. She's the frog.
Yeah. Once upon a time. Once upon a time, there was a great knight, Knight. There was a great knight who travelled the world seeking fame, honour and reputation. And on one of his adventures, he ended up off the coast of Africa, and he managed to save an African city that was under siege. And his prize was to marry the queen, this beautiful African queen, who bore him a child. Unfortunately, the knight became restless and bored with a comfortable, peaceful life in the city. He got itchy feet, and he went off on his travels again. And the next place he ended up was Wales, funnily enough. He was attracted by a great jousting competition. He ended up the champion of that great jousting competition, and once again his prize was to marry the Queen of Wales, and she bore him a child as well. And once again he started to feel trapped by a sort of domesticated life, so he went off for more adventures, more wars. Unfortunately, this time he was killed, and that was the end of him. So we'll leave him. So the Queen of Wales was completely stricken with grief. And her stewards tried to take the baby from her. So it was a baby boy. The steward said, we must care for him so that he grows to be a valiant knight, worthy of his family name. And she replied, never! Let him be anything but that. Let him be a fool. I shall keep him from fear. I shall take him from this dangerous world to where he will be safe. We will live in the innocent woods, away from risk. So the father had named the boy Percival. In English, that's Percival. You might have heard of Sir Percival from Arthurian legend. And the word Percival means pierced through the middle. But his mother refused to use that name. She would only call him her beautiful boy. And for 17 years, they grew up in the dark woods of Wales. And Percival was completely ignorant of his noble heritage. It was a very simple life, very comfortable, peaceful, in many ways beautiful life. But he felt that there was something more. It felt to him like there must be something more to life than that. The text says, on seeing the cloud shadows drift across the empty hillside, or on staring into cold depths of a lake, he would feel yearnings in his heart that he could not understand, and which filled him with a strange kind of loneliness. So that's the first part of the story. I've split the story into 3 parts. Okay, so we've got this image of this boy growing up in the woods, in the dark woods. Percival was deliberately brought up, protected from danger, away from risk, unaware of his history, unaware of his own name, unaware of the outside world. Just take a short break.
It's really bad traffic outside.
Okay. I'm going to take a seat. No, it's fine. Do you want to take a seat? Okay, so Percival was brought up in this very sheltered environment, away from risk, quite unaware of the outside world. So he was cut off. His mother cut him off from the outside world. It was as if he was only living a half-life. I use that phrase because that's a phrase that I used to use about my own life. In a year before coming to the Buddhist Centre, that was how I used to describe my life to friends. It was okay. It was, comfortable, reasonably fulfilling, but it felt like I was only living half a life, like there's only half of me actually alive. So deep down we have a sense of who we might become. And we're not satisfied with a diluted version of that. We need to discover our hidden depths. And that can feel a bit dangerous, it can feel a bit risky. Who am I in my darkest, deepest depths? So as long as there are parts of ourselves that we are cut off from because they seem too dangerous or too risky, we can't really progress so far. We can't sort of act from the whole of ourselves. Our unconscious depths will control us, and our greatest resources will remain hidden in the woods. Okay, back to the story. So Parsifal has reached the age of 17. He's a very innocent, simple fellow, as you'd imagine. But then he has an encounter. He has an encounter in the woods with a knight of the Round Table, and this knight is called Gawain. Gawain the Green Knight. And Gawain appears out from behind these trees. He's wearing silver armour, and the sunlight shines on him, so it appears like he's just radiating dazzling light. And for Parsifal, this is a vision of something completely wonderful, completely new, completely outside his ordinary experience. And he says, I must follow this light. I must follow your light. Make me as you are. And repeating history a bit, he leaves his mother and goes off on an adventure. Parsifal had been awakened from this protected existence, this protected innocent life, and he went off to King Arthur's castle. And at first, the knights of the Round Table were quite amused with this sort of innocent, simple fellow with no name. But pretty soon it was discovered that he was Parsifal. He was the son of a king. He was of noble birth. So quite quickly he learned the ways and the duties of a knight. He made quick progress, and he was just about to earn his place at the round table when an old hag appeared and cursed him. And she cursed him in the name of the Holy Grail, which I'm sure you've heard of. So King Arthur's land was in real trouble. It was a broken land ravaged by disease and famine and war. And only the Holy Grail could restore order and well-being to the land. And on one of Parsifal's recent journeys, he'd missed a great chance to bring back the Grail. So this is why he was cursed. So after that, he wandered alone for many years, undergoing great ordeals, great trials, doing his best to fight for the good, learning gradually about the true meaning of life, learning about himself, learning about the significance of the Holy Grail. It was like a spiritual awakening for him. And he was completely obsessed with searching and finding the Holy Grail by himself. Okay. So this meeting with Gawain the Green Knight. So in a way, Parsifal needs a vision of what his life could be about. And he gets that in the form of Gawain radiating a golden light. And something deep inside Parsifal resonates with that. It's a vision for him, and he knows that he has to follow. So he sets out on this quest into the unknown world. It was literally unknown for him. And throughout all his travels and his ordeals, so his inspiration would come and go. He'd make mistakes. He hurt people. He lets people down. But he keeps faith with that original vision. That's what keeps him going through all of that. In a way, that's what he's integrating himself around. So, yeah, if we talk about integration as sort of gathering aspects of ourselves. But if we are to become more integrated, we need a meaningful and inspiring vision at the centre of our lives, guiding us to live a more noble life. So Percival sets out on his quest. And on that quest, he discovers his noble heritage. He discovers what was hidden. He becomes fully integrated. So he starts off as this uneducated, simple, innocent, sort of wilderness creature, and ends up as this fully integrated being with his deepest drives unblocked. All of himself has come into play. All of himself is flowing in the direction of finding the Holy Grail. And the Grail itself is a symbol of integration. So, the land is broken apart by disease and war, and it's only the Grail that can restore order. And it's only a fully integrated being that's able to find it and use its powers. So, we need to be prepared to undertake our own quests into the unknown and sort of dare to come face to face with our unknown hidden depths. Last bit of the story. So, before Gawain was finally ready to find the Holy Grail, he had to fight 2 final battles. And the first of these battles was with a knight dressed in armour, who he thought was his enemy. So there's this ferocious battle between Parsifal and this enemy knight. And Parsifal wins the battle and is just about to kill his enemy when he sees that it's not his enemy at all, it's Gawain. It's the very knight who had awoken him from his innocent life. Gawain was the one who woke him up and had become his best friend. So in the legends, Gawain is a really colourful character. He's passionate, he's a romantic, he's full of vitality. He's constantly falling in love and breaking women's hearts. He's a bit of a scoundrel, really. And Parsifal is the opposite of that. He's very awkward around women. He's much more concerned with doing the right thing, doing what's expected of him. But in a way, the two of them need each other, and they sort of represent 2 aspects of the same person. And this is what their battle is about. They thought they were enemies, but they realised that they were friends. So, without Parsifal's purity and loyalty, Gawain would just be a scoundrel and a heartbreaker. But without Gawain's passion, Percival would just be a pale, half-blooded do-gooder, really. So, and when Percival realised... 12 minutes, Is that 12 or 15 or 20? When Percival realizes that it's his friend, he cries out, "To kill you would have been to kill myself." So sometimes our passions, our desires can frighten us and confuse us. They seem like enemies. It feels like they'll overpower us, overthrow us. But to try and destroy them is a mistake. To kill you would have been to kill myself. We need their energy. Being a good and pure Buddhist is not enough. We need to realize that our desires could be our greatest friend if we learn to use them skillfully. And then there's a final battle in the story. So in the final battle, Parsifal has a fight with a mysterious foreign knight. Yet another ferocious battle, but this time Parsifal is on the losing side. He's defeated. But the mysterious foreign knight refuses to kill him. He takes off his helmet and he reveals a face which is mottled black and white like a magpie. And it's revealed fairly quickly that this is Parsifal's African half-brother. You go right back to the beginning of the story. And it's only at this point in the story that the old hag appears again and says that Parsifal is now ready to find the Holy Grail, to claim it, and to ascend his rightful throne. So, this final battle with his half-brother, he has to face him in open battle, realise who he is, and unite with him before he's ready to claim the Grail. So the text says, the two knights seem to become a single complex animal, warring with itself, or like two lovers in an ever-deepening fierce embrace. So I think we all have our own dark half-brothers. Modern psychology would call them our unconscious shadow sides. The bits of ourselves that never get to see the light of day because, for whatever reason, we've learnt that they're unacceptable, dangerous, not fit to be seen by society, plain bad. It could be anger, it could be desire, it could be guilt, it could be pride, it could be so many things. I often seem to meet my dark half-brother on solitary retreats, funny enough. So again, unless we have the courage to allow these shadow sides into the light, we will be cutting ourselves off from part of ourselves. We won't become a united, integrated being. So that's Parsifal. As I said, his name means pierced through the middle. So only when what has been split apart is brought back together can he progress to a high level. I'll give him the last words. I'm less a simpleton than I once was. I know that if there is to be any meaning in my life, it won't come from blind obedience to others. It will rise like a living thing out of my own encounters with experience.
So, interestingly enough, actually, where my story takes part it's a very different part of the world, different kind of genre altogether, but kind of has the same message, actually, which is really interesting. So, I'm talking about monkey. So, I don't know, if you didn't grow up in the UK and you're under a certain age, monkey might not mean anything to you. So are there a few people who's thinking, who's that? No? Everyone kind of has an idea of monkey. Fantastic. No. Some shaking heads. Okay. Oh well, too young. Okay, I'll tell the story. So basically, Monkey was a children's television programme that was around in the 70s, 80s, something like that. And I think there were some repeats quite recently. And there was also actually an opera that was written by Damon Albarn that was based on the story, because the story that comes from China and Japan. So it was a Japanese series, it was filmed in China, and it was dubbed into a very kind of weird English. And basically it tells the story of a monkey and this little group of people. Now, I apologise for the photographs, you might not be able to see them that well, but I think a lot of them are just clips that have been taken off television programmes. They're not brilliant quality. But basically what's happening in this story is there's a character called Tripitaka who's riding on the horse. And Tripitaka is a bodhisattva and a man, but played by an actress, a female actor in this thing. Then Monkey's leading the horse. There's Pigsy to the left, and there's a character called Sandy to the right. And the horse is also a character as well. And the basic story is that, Monkey is a very powerful monkey king who was born from a stone egg and became a stone monkey. And there's a great lyric in the opening song to there's kind of like this kind of really great music kind of that goes with the programme. And it says,
Sing it.
he's the... So, Monkey's the funkiest monkey that ever popped. Okay, so he's the funkiest monkey. And he's very powerful, and he actually kind of is invited up to heaven, but he's also very mischievous. And he's so bad, he's so very, very bad. He does all sorts of things like eating the peaches of eternal life. So he does have eternal life actually, but he shouldn't have done that. But he gets trapped for 500 years. The Buddha traps him for 500 years under a mountain so that he learns patience. And what happens is that Tripitaka, the bodhisattva, is asked by another bodhisattva to go and help China. So China's become full of kind of degenerate ways. And what this bodhisattva is asked to do is to go to India and get the scriptures of the Buddha, the proper way of living, and bring them back, which is an epic journey at that time. So Tripitaka needs some help and asks the other four characters to help him. And apart from Monkey, who obviously was thrown out of heaven, the other three are also figures that were thrown out of heaven for committing various kind of very bad things that they did. Okay, so... Oops, sorry. Okay, so this is them again. So basically, in the television programme, if you remember it, it's really interesting actually, looking back, because I did watch it when I was young, and I loved it. And all I remember really is loads of kind of fights and special effects and things. But when I've looked at it again, it's really, really dharmic. It's really brilliant, actually. So there's a lot of kind of things. They meet loads of monsters and evil beings on every programme and have loads of fights. There's loads of really amazing fights. And for me, it was the start of, that kind of like kung fu kind of magical kind of where people can float up in the air and do all sorts of magical things. So Monkey's a really good fighter, very cunning. And Monkey can turn himself into all sorts of different shapes, and he's got some particular powers. So here he is protecting the bodhisattva. So, I'll talk about him first. So played by an actress, which I thought was really interesting, and a very innocent, very lovely character who only thinks the best of everyone, and actually quite often in stories has to protect the demons or the evil people from his own protectors because they're so naughty. And I've got a few pictures of her, because I think she's really beautiful. Okay, so here's Monkey again. And one of Monkey's special powers is he can whiz about on a pink cloud, which is really great. Like, when I re-looked at this, like, the special effects are really poor compared to today. It's just great. And it's just like, so he zips about on a pink cloud, and he also has this very amazing magic staff that he's holding that can be all sorts of different sizes as well. So that's Monkey, mischievous, cunning, always up to no good in some way, wanting lots of things, leaping about. His mind is always leaping about. This is Pigsy, and Pigsy was, he's gluttonous, and he's always after the women. And he was actually thrown out of heaven for flirting with the Jade Emperor's wife. And so he spends a lot of his time in the stories. Yeah, he's just, well, Pigsy, that's his name. That's his kind of, like, he represents a kind of craving. This is Sandy. Sandy wears, I hadn't realised actually, it wears skulls around his neck. I'd completely forgotten that. And Sandy was, let me just look that up and get it right. He was a a cannibal, a water monster and a cannibal, and he was expelled from heaven because he caused a precious jade cup to be broken. So he's an ex-cannibal. He's also quite kind of intellectual, actually. Okay, so this story is actually based on a real story. And first of all, it was based on a novel, which is called Journey to the West, which I think is a very famous Chinese story. And it's based on the real story of Xuanzang, this is a picture of Xuanzang. And Xuanzang was an amazing Chinese person who, in about 600 CE, left China and took a very long journey over the Himalayas to India to get the scriptures and bring them back. And he had all sorts of adventures on the way. And actually, it's through his writings that we know a lot of the history of some of the places that you'd go on if you go on a pilgrimage. But if you want to know more about him, I'd really recommend listening to Bodhinaga's talks, because I think he's done a few on Xuanzang, and they're very good. So you could find those on the website, on the Sheffield Buddhist Centre website, and find out more about him. So it's interesting, it was based on a real story. Okay, so this is the Buddha. Which I love it, and okay. So when, what happens is Monkey's being very naughty, and he gets summoned by the Buddha. He's fighting us. He gets summoned by her, and you can see that he's standing on her hand, and he says to her, "I thought you were a fella." And I'm not doing the accent. Simon's been doing the accent all day.
I have not.
So, okay. Another picture of the Buddha. Monkey. Okay, so basically, it's a story of Monkey, companion to Tripataka, travelling to India on this journey. And in fact, the programme only ran for a few series, and they never actually got there and brought the teachings back, but the real life Xuanzang did. So what does the story tell us about integration? Well, in a way, you could see the story as being about just one individual moving towards enlightenment, but one individual who's made up of lots of different aspects. So there's the Bodhisattva, Tripataka, who is very, very pure, very good, but actually not very practical, and always getting himself kind of in situations where things aren't really working out for him, and he's at risk. Then you've got Monkey, who's very clever, but just kind of jumps, he's the original monkey mind. Okay, he just jumps about all over the place, wanting lots of different things, interested in lots of different things, and getting himself in lots of trouble. Then you've got Pixie, who's that kind of craving part of ourselves, and you've got Sandy. And I'm not quite sure who Sandy is. I did look him up a bit, and somebody said they thought he maybe represented that kind of intellectual side of us. It's kind of like he's got lots of philosophical ideas, but he's not quite connected with his heart or with his gut. And all of them travel together, and they all need each other, actually, in terms of fighting the demons together. So I suppose how I'd see that is that, how that's useful to us in this story, is that we can actually give parts of ourselves a personality and give them a kind of being in a way, and then we can talk to them. So, for instance, in the past, I've often imagined my anxiety as being this little blue fizzy kind of monster that I've kind of had a chat with sometimes about what it wants. And I've also had conversations with a part of me that's very critical, just kind of very judgmental, very critical part of myself. I've kind of tried to give that a personality and have a discussion with that about what it wants. And I think that's a way that we can bring all these different selves that we've been talking about in this series of talks together and get them going in the same way. What they're all going around, of course, they're all, as Maitridasa said, we need to be organised around a particular principle. So their principle is they are travelling to India to bring back the teachings of the Buddha, the Dharma. But more than that, in a way, I think they're also organised around the Bodhisattva, because he does an interesting thing, which is, so around Monkey's head, can you see there's a gold crown? So when Monkey gets too bad, the Bodhisattva can actually make that go smaller, and he gets in terrible pain. He kind of goes like this and kind of writhes about. So the Bodhisattva has that as a kind of power over him. And what that might represent actually is the power of the precepts in a way. It's a way that we can actually use something when we're trying to talk to different parts of ourselves. if we have the guiding principle of the precepts to guide us, we'll know that what we're doing is okay. And interestingly, not in the series, but apparently in the story, once they've actually all got to India and got the Dharma and brought it back to China and they've become enlightened, the Bodhisattva says to Monkey, would you like to have your crown taken off? And he says no, he doesn't want to, he wants to keep it. And it's a bit like he then decides he actually wants to live from his own choice by the precepts. Okay, so... yeah, I think that's pretty much all I'm going to say, actually.
So, I'm going to tell the story of Faust. So there's quite a few versions of the story of Faust. He's the man who sells his soul to the devil. And these versions usually have a very Christian sort of moral about the punishment that will eventually catch up with someone who pursues worldly pleasures. But the version I want to talk about is the one by the German poet Goethe, which has a very different theme and a very different twist in the tale. Now, I have to say before I start that Goethe's Faust is a long and a complex work, and my talk is not behaving itself. It's a long and a complex work, and it's often not easy to see what Goethe's trying to get across. In fact, I'm not actually sure that Goethe knew sometimes what he was trying to get across, because he kept tinkering with his text over years and years and years and changing it. Scholars have come up with all sorts of loads of interpretations to suit the particular bees in their bonnet. And I'm going to try and sum it up in 15 minutes or less now. So what you're going to get is a very simplified account of what Vadanya thinks it means, or what it means to Vadanya. So distracting my audience. So the story starts with a man called Faust, obviously. And Faust is a dry and dusty scholar. He has got a strong spiritual aspiration, but he lives in his rational mind. He's surrounded by books, cut off from the colourful world around him, cut off from his own emotions and deeper drives, cut off from all those energies that are tied up with them. We can imagine him always sitting in a dim, dusty, Gothic stone study in the college where he teaches, with his head in a book or deep in abstract thought, a bit stooped maybe from all this reading, limbs maybe weakened by constant sitting and thinking, with tired eyes maybe, a bit pale and saggy in the skin. He's a bit boring and grey. Getting old before his time. He says of himself, God, how these walls cramp my soul, this cursed, stifling prison hole, where even heaven's dear light must pass dimly through panes of painted glass. And can you still ask why your heart is pent and aching in your breast, robbed of all energy and zest? So that's Faust at the beginning of the story. He's robbed of all energy and zest. He's all head and intellect, all sort of ideals, but he's out of touch with his sources of energy. He needs to integrate those aspects of himself that have got energy behind them. Okay, that's Faust. But even before we meet Faust, at the very, very beginning of this story, we find ourselves in heaven, listening, bizarrely, to a conversation between God and the devil. And the devil is asking God to give him permission to tempt Faust. And God says, well, Faust is my servant. He said, he serves me, but still serves me in confusion. But one day this fresh green tree will blossom and bear fruit in rich profusion. So God values Faust as his servant. But he wants him to grow. He wants him to grow like a tree and bear blossoms and fruit. He wants him to grow to his full stature. But God seems very happy to let the devil tempt Faust. He gives his permission quite willingly. In fact, he says, man is too apt to sink into mere satisfaction. A total standstill is his constant wish. Therefore, your company, busily devilish, serves well to stimulate him into action. So God thinks of Faust as his faithful servant, but even God is bored with Faust. God thinks Faust is stuck, he's stagnant. What does he say? Total standstill. He's stuck at a total standstill. God wants him to find his energies and use them. He wants him to get out and live so that he grows into the tree that he could become. And that way he's going to be of some use to God, because he's not used to anybody at the moment, not even himself. In fact, he's seriously contemplating suicide. He's so depressed. God thinks that a bit of devilish energy is just what Faust needs. So he gives the devil permission to tempt him. Okay, so who or what is the devil here? We're used to thinking of the devil as evil, as opposed to everything that's good. But God and the devil seem to be cooperating here to sort of attempt to get Faust to grow. I think we should get away from Christian ideas of the devil and remember how that Christian idea of the devil, how that Christian figure of the devil arose. With his goatee legs and his animal hooves and his animal tail. The devil was the Christian attempt to demonize the old gods of nature, like Pan. Which Christianity had supplanted. So the devil represents our deep drives, if you like, that those old gods represented. The part of us that comes from the depths, but seen always as something evil that needs to be suppressed. But loads of our energy is tied up in those drives. If we suppress them, we become pale and bloodless, like Faust. That idea of the devil, that view of the devil, is the way, for example, the poet William Blake saw Satan. So Blake saw Satan as symbolising the liberation of our natural energies, whereas he saw the Christian God as symbolising the repression of energy. And I think to understand what's going on in Goethe's Faust, we need to see the devil in that way, rather than in the sort of Christian way, as evil, a symbol of evil. So God lets the devil tempt Faust. God wants to tempt out Faust's deeper energies. And those energies and drives that are in a prison at the moment, they're locked in. Because that's the way he will get back the energy and joy and vividness that he needs to be, the man he could be. And this is the way it happens. Faust is shut up in his dim, dusty study, feeling stuck and sorry for himself, and contemplating suicide, in fact, when he looks out of his window and he sees sunshine, and he sees all the students from the college and the apprentices from the town and the young women, and they're all singing and partying and trooping out of the city because it's Easter. It's the old pagan celebration of fertility. It's the old pagan celebration of the return of light and warmth, and they're all going out to have a good time at the Easter fair. And the young men are singing about looking for the fun of the fair, or a feast, or a fight, or other things beginning with F. And all this moves Faust. It really moves Faust. His dried up old cold soul is pricked by the sunshine and the songs and the sense of fun and celebration. So he too goes out and he joins the crowd going to the Easter fair. And while he's at the fair, he becomes fascinated by a big black dog. And incidentally, big black dogs are a traditional symbol for the devil, a representation of the devil. The devil appears as big black dogs. So Faust takes the big black dog home, back to his rooms in the college. When he gets the dog there, after sort of having a bit of an argument with the dog about how much noise it's making, because he wants to think and read, lo and behold, the dog turns into Mephistopheles, the devil. And then the next day, Mephistopheles comes back, but this time dressed as a cavalier. He's dressed as a cavalier, a rich, jaunty, handsome clothes, those rich, jaunty, handsome clothes, a feather in his cap. He's the epitome of sort of the lusty, energetic young man, full of chutzpah and humour and whatever. And he says to Faust, "Be ruled by me, wear clothes like mine, strike out, be free, and learn what the good life can be." So Faust is thoroughly fed up with his current life and state. So he says, he's moaning about his state. He says, do without, give it up. That old command pursues us down the years. Every hint of joy dies of nagging scruples, and life's mess destroys my active soul's creativeness. So the devil, in all his sort of vibrant vigour and whatever, really impresses Faust. So Faust does a deal with the devil. Faust wants what the devil's got. And the deal he gets is that the devil will go with him, he will accompany him, Mephistopheles will accompany him and serve him and get him where he wants in life. And in return, of course, the devil will take Faust's soul when he dies. So the devil will be his while he's alive, but he will be the devil's when he dies. And Faust signs that contract with his blood. And then what follows is a rebirth for Faust. Some of it's very, very funny, as when Mephistopheles stands in for Faust, wearing his scholar's gown as a lecturer, and shocks the students by saying things that simply cannot be said in a university. Today, of course, he'd be banned from going by the Students' Union. But the devil restores Faust's youth and energy and vigour and gives him new self-confidence. So, for example, when the devil first offers to take him into society, to introduce him to loads of people, Faust says, "I'll never know how to mix with people, having lived on my own. I'll feel inferior. I'll freeze. I always shall be ill at ease." But the devil gives Faust an injection of new chutzpah and vigour. And Faust starts a completely different sort of life, full of event and adventure and colour. It has to be said, he does some quite unskillful things. Without really meaning to, he causes the death of Gretchen, the woman he falls in love with. He stabs her brother, admittedly in self-defence, etc., etc. That's a bit extreme, but I suppose that's the risk we run if we let some of those parts of ourselves off the leash. I think a Buddhist might want to harness those parts a little bit more than Faust did, not give them quite such a free rein. But the fact is, whatever we might think about that, Faust is reborn. He becomes a bigger, more vivid, vigorous person, much more full of energy and creativity. But then, of course, after some very strange adventures in Volume 2, which I do not pretend to understand, the time comes for Faust to pay the price for all of this. He dies, and the devil comes to claim him. And this is where the twist comes, because at this point, God steps in and vetoes the contract with the devil that Faust has made. And just as Satan is poised to take Faust down to hell, the whole scene is filled with angels who, singing marvellous hymns, take him up to heaven. So this seems to me, how do you interpret this? Faust has been serving God all along, or whatever God represents. Faust and the devil, God and the devil are really about the same thing. They've both been cooperating to help Faust grow to become the full-sized tree that he could become, bearing the blossoms that he could bear. So I think one lesson for ourselves that we could learn from this story is that we shouldn't let the fact that we're following the Buddhist path mean that we give up all our sources of pleasure like Faust did, even if they're not of a very highest spiritual level. I've heard people say, I'm going to give up climbing, I'm going to give up playing the guitar, I'm going to give up gardening because they're a distraction from practicing the Dharma. Do not do this. You'll end up like Faust, dry and dusty. And then you might have to get out of that by going around killing people. We need some pleasure in our life. And if we don't get it, we end up like Faust at the beginning of the story. When we can get all our pleasure from meditation, from deeds of merit, and highly refined art, that will be great. But in the meantime, we need to work from where we are. We need to recognise that what really gets our energies going. And if that's punk, let's not pretend it's Puccini. We need to find our energy, and when we find it, we need to find ways to use that energy to help our higher purpose. First, we've got to find it. And to do that, we might need a bit of deviliness. But if we do all that, we might end up a bit like the pagan figures that the devil is a caricature of. The Christian devil is a caricature of. These are creatures that are part human, part animal. Creatures like the centaur, part beautiful horse, part noble man. A symbol of a person who has integrated all those lower drives, all that lower energy. So they've got the wild energy of an animal like the horse, but all at the service of the reason and higher vision and higher motivations of a spiritual human being. So that's what we can do if we don't do what Faust did, but integrate all those different parts of ourselves.